One of the things that kept coming to mind was courage, and the courage that it takes to tell your story.
Making that connection between what you've experienced and moving beyond that to, okay, now what do we do about it?
It's really nice to break that cycle and have a loving home for our children.
Thank you for joining us today for Courage Over Comfort. Today we are joined by Dr. Oates, a provider at Kaiser Permanente and involved in the Family Violence Prevention Program at the hospital. As well, we'll be joined by Amber Tran, who is an entrepreneur, a mother, and a former survivor of relationship violence. Thank you for being here and enjoy the conversation. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Courage Over Comfort. We're excited to have you here and to be able to talk about relationship violence and go a little deeper. It's a conversation that requires both being brave and being uncomfortable. And this is something that we understand that once you get through that discomfort is going to help us grow and transform. When we started this dialogue and started to think about and envision this discussion, one of the things that kept coming to mind was courage and the courage that it takes to tell your story. And it reminded me of a woman who shared the core word for courage in Latin is core, right? And that's heart. And she shared that courage is really telling your story with your full heart. And that is critically important for survivors, and it's critically important for us to know what courage it takes for survivors to come forward and share their story. And so that's what our conversations will be about. Today, you're going to hear from a provider as well as somebody who has lived through the experience of relationship violence. And we'll have a discussion. And what we're really trying to unpack today is the intergenerational cycle of relationship violence. And it'll be uncomfortable at times, but we know that that discomfort is a moment to really reflect and to grow. And hopefully, as we walk out of here today, we will all have more knowledge about relationship violence in a way that then we can also be part of the solution and help someone else that may need our support, or if we ourselves are in need of support, that we know where to go and access. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have Dr. Lisa Esquilian-Oates, and she's a family medicine physician at Kaiser Permanente with a strong clinical focus on women's health. She's a longtime board member at Human Options, and she plays a vital role in identifying and responding to intimate partner violence in the healthcare setting. As a frontline physician, Dr. Oates brings medical expertise and a trauma-informed lens to recognizing and addressing abuse, helping to connect patients with the support and safety they need. Amber Tran is a speaker, entrepreneur, member of our Survivor Advisory Council, and a survivor who shares her powerful story to inspire others and break the stigma around relationship violence. A proud mom, business owner, Amber blends her personal journey with her passion of empowering women through education, healing, and entrepreneurship. She partners with Human Options to raise awareness and advocate for lasting change in the community. Today's conversation, we're going to explore the intergenerational cycle of relationship violence and really try and understand why it happens and what that experience is like so that we can interrupt it moving forward. So here, our first question will go to Amber. Amber, will you please share your story?
As a child, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. The first experience I had with domestic violence was between my parents, and I was 3 years old, and I can remember the event like it was yesterday. And, things like that will stay with you a lifetime. So I can recall things very vividly. But now moving forward, I've experienced that several times throughout my life with my mom and different partners that she was with. The cycle kind of kept perpetuating itself. And in that first experience as a 3-year-old child, I knew that that was wrong and I felt helpless, but I also knew that that was something I didn't want for myself in my future. As a 3-year-old, you only have so much capability and capacity to really hone in on what that means for your future and things like that. But fast forward to today, I've married my high school sweetheart. We've been married for 10 years, together for 23, if you guys can believe that. Not old enough, And we have 2 daughters together, and we're building a very beautiful life, free of violence. And he knows my background and all the traumas that have come along with that. And so he's sensitive to that nature as well. And it's really nice to break that cycle and have a loving home for our children.
Can you share a little bit more about what it was like for you or the things that you did to break the cycle for yourself?
For me, there's a lot of work that goes into that, especially, as the cycle kept perpetuating itself. It's like, why does this seem to keep happening over and over again? Like, my mom is such a wonderful woman. She leads with her heart. She has so much love to give. And I just couldn't understand why the people that she continued to be with would harm her in so many different ways. It wasn't only physical, it was emotional, it was financial, it was in all the different ways that one can, choose violence. And it was really heartbreaking to see that because she didn't deserve it at all. And so having that scope, it was really important for me to not accept that and to really put up barriers, but also boundaries for myself so things like that wouldn't happen in my future.
It sounds like you've done a great job at setting those boundaries and really trying to heal from that.
Yeah, I do try. It's also taken quite a bit of therapy. Mm-hmm. So a lot of really deep conversations to go back and healing that inner child as well. The work is never ending. It's always ongoing. And I work with a coach to this day, and I work with tons of therapists over the years for different things to heal from everything that I have experienced. And I try and have open conversations with my children. I mean, they're only 9 and 5, but, in the capacity that they can understand. Being married, you are going to have disagreements. So it's not like we live in this perfect home with rose-filled glasses all the time. And so it's important for me to let them know, like, this is what's acceptable, this is what's not acceptable. You don't tolerate anybody putting their hands on you. You don't tolerate people trying to take things away from you that belong to you and who you are as a person. And for them to understand what's healthy and what's unhealthy.
Dr. Oates, I know you work with plenty of patients who've had some adverse childhood experiences, and listening to Amber's story, can you share a little bit about what that conversation might look like with the patient and how you assess those adverse childhood experiences and their impact on a woman's health?
Yeah, absolutely. So adverse childhood experiences are very common. If you're kind of looking at the range, they tend to fall into 3 different categories: abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction. And some recent studies have showed that like 2/3 of adults have at least one, and like 1 in 5 has 4 or more ACEs. And this is important because we've begun to learn that the more ACEs you have, the more at risk you are of experiencing negative health impacts from it. Things like heart disease, diabetes, asthma, also a lot of other bad stuff, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, even early death can go with it. But that's just a number, right? And so we are so much more than our number. And I think this is where a really important part of the conversation comes in. The first part is making that connection between what you've experienced or what's happened to you and what's going on now after having those experiences, and making that connection about how they're related. But then moving beyond that to, okay, now what do we do about it? You can't undo those experiences, but you can heal from it, and you can move forward. And those steps to healing yourself often result in better health, and also, really importantly, breaking that cycle so that the next generation, your children and your children's children, don't also end up having those same experiences in their lives as well.
I know this is a really difficult conversation to have, particularly with patients who are coming in, and some may be in their first trimester of pregnancy, or they may be sort of in the process of becoming parents, somehow getting pregnant. And how do you have that conversation with the patient?
Yeah, I that's my favorite time to have these conversations because there's not yet that next generation, and often the mom to be is still young, her partner's still young, and so they may not have developed or any of those negative consequences yet, and they probably haven't made a connection between their childhood experiences and how they're going to be as parents and as adults as they age. So it's a great time for prevention if we can have those conversations now about how they were raised, what went on in their family, what their family norms are, and how that may have affected them. We can then get them whatever support or resources they need to help them be more positive parenting, handling the stressors that we know that they're going to experience. When life stress happens, which happens to everybody, but if you don't have great role models for handling that stress, especially for parenting under those stresses, sometimes we fall back to what we've experienced or what we've seen happen in our families, and that's where the risk can really be there for the children. So providing that support and that help can really help their children have less risk.
Amber, you've talked about something similar in terms of revisiting and connecting back to that experience that you had, especially now as a mom, and as you've been trying to raise your young girls. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like to revisit that and then be able to sort of heal and move forward through that, and then both with your partner and how you're engaging your daughters in that process as well?
It's always been really important for me, for my girls to feel safe and confident and comfortable coming to me for any type of topic that they're going through. My daughter went through a kind of difficult time in school last year, and I could tell something was off with her a little bit, and I wanted to make a really safe space for her to come and have that hard conversation with me, and it took a couple of days, but I could tell that she wasn't her normal cheery happy self, and finally she felt comfortable and had the courage to come and share with me what she had been experiencing. And just to come and share and for me to respond from a place of compassion and understanding, I hope that she keeps that with her so we can continue to build our relationship and have those heartfelt conversations. My mom's always been really open and honest with me, and I really do respect her for the things that she shared with me through my childhood. So both of my parents previously had addictions and had gone through difficult things like that, and my mom was always very open with me into that regard, sharing that she was going to NA and AA meetings to better herself so she could better our lives together. And as a little kid, you don't really understand how heavy those words are and what that truly means, but I knew that she was getting help for herself so she could better our lives. And, that's what I want to do for my kids too. Even though it's a different circumstance, a different situation, I want my kids to know that I've done work on myself so they can they can be comfortable coming and having those hard conversations with me, and we can figure it out together.
It's such a nice gift to give your children, where they don't have to experience that same relationship and the same traumas that you experienced as a child. How have you talked about your experiences with them?
I would say that they probably know very little at this phase in their lives just because they are 9 and 5. And so I've shared a little bit about, my childhood and my upbringing and how fortunate they are to be in this type of environment and all the things that they have at their disposal now. And my older daughter, she's like, Mom, I get really sad when you talk about your childhood. And I'm like, I don't share these things with you to make you sad. I share them with you so you know where I came from, and to see like how blessed you are and like how proud I am to be able to provide this type of life for you. And, as a parent, that's all you really want.
Definitely, and you're doing a great job, and it's all very, it still comes to the surface very easily, right? And I think those are things that make these conversations so important and so challenging, and something that people don't really understand is that even as you move through these challenges and these times, and each step is a new beginning, and each step is something where you're working on deepening that healing and making sure that you're creating space for these conversations while it's still part of you, right? It's still a part of your history, and it's still something that shaped you. And I could definitely appreciate that you're so willing to share that with us and so willing to open your heart and share that story with us. Dr. Oates, as we think about this as a provider, what's something that providers can do that can help interrupt the cycle of relationship violence and help prevent it moving forward?
So as I was mentioning before, there are ways in which we can kind of help kind of shine the light on how the relationship between what they've experienced in the past and how they may parent or how their health may be in the future. But we definitely know that there are a lot of things that can help reduce the impact of those traumatic experiences. And I think Amber's a great example of that. And I just want to point out that even though you had all of those adverse experiences, and I don't know what your number would be, but I'm sure you've thought about it. But we know that the resilience that we have, which some of it's innate, related to our personality, but a lot of it is related to the support we have around us, really makes a difference and really changes the trajectory of a person's life. And I want to say, just from what little you've shared, that your mom sounds like she was a great source of support and strength, and also it's that that constant presence, right? So even though things may be chaotic with her relationships or whatever was going on, you knew you always had her, and she was there for you and had conversations and was open with having those conversations with you, and that, I think, that is a lot of why you're here today, sitting next to me, sharing this, and being able to share about how you've built this great life and your beautiful girls. And so that support person can often is a parent, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a grandparent, it can be an aunt, uncle, it could be a neighbor, it could be a friend's parent. But just having that constant source of someone who is there, right? Who you can go to and even just get a meal from, a snack from, have some conversation with them. Just knowing that they're there can make a big difference in someone's lives.
We often find that having that person who listens in a way that is not judgmental and helps support the individual, while also not casting judgment on those involved in the story, right? Because the story involves multiple people. And each one of those people, whether it's the person causing harm or it's the person being harmed, there's still an emotional connection to each one of those. And so trying to really hold those stories in a way that allows, in this case, Amber's story, or it could be somebody else's story, to tell the story without feeling like now everybody that I'm talking about is going to be judged. Everybody in my family will be judged. And so that is so critically important as a way of holding space, right? A way of really capturing those stories and making sure that it's okay to talk about those stories until that person's willing to take the next step.
Yeah, I think that's a really great step, a great point, because often that support person is a grandparent who is a parent of one of those people, whether it's the person using harm or being harmed, and so as a child, if you feel comfortable just talking about what's happening and knowing that that person is still going to be there, that there's not going to be judgment on either of those parents or even on you as the child, then I think that, yeah, that's a really good thing to keep in mind.
Amber, I know you've shared the support that your mom provided.
Mm-hmm.
If you think back, are there other individuals in your life that really helped you and provide that support and really kind of listening to your story, or someone that might have listened to your mom's story that helped her get to a point where she could access the help that was necessary?
Definitely. I don't think that I shared this earlier, but we came through this human options emergency shelter when I was 14 years old. So that's my tie to human options. And because my mom was in another poor relationship that didn't venture well, and we needed to flee for our safety, especially my mom's safety. And so it was my mom, my little sister, and I who came through human options. And really was, my mom calls you guys human options, her safe haven. She felt saved when we came through those doors and really changed the trajectory of our lives, all of us. So for that, we're forever grateful. I know that there was tons of resources that guided her to her freedom, to where she is today. And for me, I would say, besides my mom, she's always been a pillar, that constant for me. And also one of my best friends. We met when we were 12 years old. She was my first friend when we relocated to Orange County, and we're best friends to this day. So she's like my adopted sister. And we've shared everything. I mean, she's gone through her own share of family traumas and things like that. So, we have the utmost respect for each other, and it's always been a judgment-free zone for us. So, if you just have like one friend who you're open to share your heart with and be vulnerable, and, they'll share in return, and just to have each other and guide each other along the way, it really can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, having that safe space, right? That safe person that you can really open up to and share your story with, and know that they're going to do the right thing and share their own thoughts with you, and give you the feedback that you need to get through that moment.
I mean, there's other people too in my life, like my husband. I met him when I was 15, so freshly out of the shelter. We're high school sweethearts, and so, he's been another constant in my life for a lot of years now. And so it's really nice to have so many strong pillars who have really made a giant impact on who I am today, and we've all grown together. And, we all come from similar backgrounds, honestly, and just to be able to navigate our own lives and overcome all these obstacles and hurdles, I'm really proud of all of us, honestly.
And it's a lot to be proud of, and it's one day at a time, and sometimes those hurdles come up again, and you're having to kind of navigate a new chapter. As you sort of are raising your daughters, they're still young, and I'm sure they have a relationship with your mom. And is there anything you'd be willing to share about the relationship they have with your dad, and anything that how they understand that the relationships?
Sure. Yeah, both of my girls have a relationship with both of their grandparents. Even though my father lives out of state, he comes and visits. And what happened was so long ago, and I don't want them to look at their grandfather in a certain way. I don't want them to be afraid of spending time with him, because as we grow older and we learn from our experiences and things like that, like I've seen the man that my father is today is not the man that he used to be. And, even though my parents aren't together either, they're still cordial. They'll still sit down and have dinners together, and, they'll laugh and be friendly with each other. So they've forgiven each other in that sense as well. And so it's really kind of nice now that everybody's grown from the experiences of the past. There's not too much resentment I can see now. And it's really a good thing for my kids to have a relationship with both of their grandparents, because the grandparents shouldn't be harmed from having a relationship because they haven't done anything to the children. And I don't want them to look at their grandparents like, oh, well, Nana did this and Grandpa did that. That's not here nor there. And I rather them just enjoy the time that's left with their grandparents than dwell on, what happened to me in my childhood, because I've grown from that as well.
And I'd imagine that's part of the healing process, right? Is to be able to accept what has happened and move toward a place of forgiveness and really want to honor the healing that's happened for your parents as well.
Yeah, definitely, because I never blamed either of them for their circumstances and for what I experienced, because understanding what I understand now, it was a cycle. Their parents did that to them, and then so they did that to, their loved ones. It was just the cycle perpetuating itself. And as a child, you don't understand that. But as you get older, you're kind of like, okay, now it's my turn. I don't like this. This is not healthy. This is not where I want to see my family. I don't want to be harmed. I don't want my children to be harmed. So really setting boundaries and saying, this is what I'm okay with and this is what I'm not okay with, and having those honest conversations. Like, my husband's very aware to my sensitivities, to even like raising of the voice. I'm like, listen, like, this is not good for me. It's not good for the girls. It's not good for you. So, you're married and things, you have disagreements. Like, it's just going to happen. That's life. But to be able to circle back and have those real honest conversations is where I feel like the healing is really in those moments.
I think it's really great to hear that the relationship you have with both of your parents and your kids have with their grandparents is healthy and going well. I just want to say, though, that may not be the case for everybody and everybody's circumstance. And it is okay if you feel, that somebody is not safe or, a relationship is toxic, that, you do need to honor that as well. Yeah.
That's a great point, because oftentimes we think about the healing process as moving quickly, right? That the abuse or the physical abuse or the emotional abuse stops, and now everything is better, and you can come together in the same way. But honoring that boundary, as Amber has talked about, really making sure that conversations are respectful. I've heard you, Amber, as you've talked about this, as being really clear on, like, we're going to talk about this, right? We're gonna go back and sort of define what feels okay to me, and I'm going to model that for my children, and I'm going to continue to have that conversation. And Dr. Oates, you're so right, is that often it's survivors who have been through that experience are working so hard at making it okay.
Right. Like, the burden is still on them to make the relationship work, and that is not the case.
Absolutely. That's such an important note to make. Dr. Oates, I'm curious about, as a practitioner and somebody who has a lot of trust with their patients, right? Patients come to you and they often will just sort of share their stories. What is something that you feel that practitioners can do, service providers can do, that would create a space in which survivors can share their story and get connected to help?
Yeah. I think that my biggest advice for doctors who are uncomfortable having these conversations or welcoming these conversations is letting them know that it's okay if they don't know what to do or they don't know what to say. Just listening and being grateful, saying you're grateful that they shared their story, your patient shared their story with you, that, an empathic response, I'm sorry this happened to you, you didn't do anything to deserve it. Oftentimes that's all that's needed. Doctors want to fix things. We want to heal people. That's why we go into this business. And when we're dealing with abusive situations, it's scary because we can't fix it. It's not in our power to fix it, and so that often leads to just sort of like pretending like it doesn't exist. Let's just not open that box. Let's just move forward with something else. But and they don't recognize that just that moment of having somebody share their story and being believed, right, and not being questioned, like, are you sure it happened that way? Like, what did you do to make him say that or do that? Just believing them and receiving it and accepting it graciously, I think, is sometimes all that's necessary.
And making sure and normalizing the conversation, normalizing asking if you're okay, I think is often key, right? Because people don't do that, and I think often you think about the abusive partner, much of their control lies on no one will ever believe you, to your point, and
this is your fault,
right? And so, and a lot of it is like, and that's not really what happened, right? So a lot of it is somebody receiving the story. It needs to be around not reinforcing that narrative, around really trying to understand versus like, are you sure? And questioning, because that's just sort of giving that abusive partner more power.
Right.
In that cycle.
And there's the stereotypes too, right? So I'm a family medicine doctor, so for a long time I would see couples, right? So they would both be my patients. And when people come to the doctors, they're showing their best self. It's very obvious. Many people come dressed up. They've got their makeup on. This is their best self they're bringing in, and so we don't see what goes on at home. And just like a battered woman's not going to come in often with black eyes and obvious injuries, a batterer is not going to come in, with their abusive language or with their weapon of choice or whatever it is, right? They're coming in and they're very cordial. They're, they may have a lot of charisma, and that guy's great. Your husband's great. Like, what are you talking? Like that didn't happen, right? And that happens all the time in the situations where the physician is the physician for both people. So
hard to unpack that and hard to kind of see through the charm sometimes. When I know I've asked you a couple of questions, I wanted to open up to the audience to see if the audience had any questions for you.
Okay, question for, I guess, the three of you. What would you say to someone who notices warning signs in a friend or family member or even a colleague during like a conversation and you don't know what to offer?
First, I'd say exactly like what I was just talking about. Listening, believing, and asking, if they're okay, and asking what they need from you, I think is really important. Instead of just assuming like, oh, this is what you need, this is what you should do. Really asking like, how can I support you? What do you want to happen next? Where do you want to go with this? I think is a great place to start.
I think Dr. Oates touched on it perfectly. Just being willing to even notice that something is wrong and checking in, making that person feel seen and heard will speak volumes for them, because a lot of times their voices have been silenced and they're scared to speak up for themselves, or they've been in a bad situation for too long, and a lot of times their abusers are very manipulative and they start to take things away little by little. It's taking away your friends. So if you see your friends who you used to hang out with regularly and they're in a new relationship and they're kind of disappearing, and you see them getting smaller, definitely check in on those friends. They probably need you more than you realize.
Yeah, I think it's also so important to say, I'm so sorry this is happening to you, right? And I think really identifying that this is something they are not causing, and being able to reinforce that this isn't something they're causing by any behavior that they're doing, and that alone sometimes can help, along with what Dr. Oates and Amber have shared, is that often every opportunity that you get, see it as an opportunity to counter that message and to really actively listen and tell them you're there and you're worried, right, and that they don't deserve that. And then just really whenever you need something, I'm here. And so it's keeping that door open, because if you're not keeping that door open, the abuser wins, right? The abuser gets more power by cutting off all connections to the outside world. So Dr. Oates has talked about, doctors want to fix it. Well, most of us, want to fix it. It's like, let's just get to the root of it. Let's get this done with. Let's get you out of this relationship. And what that causes is, again, you're not empowering the person who's living through it, so giving them the power to make that choice. Mm-hmm. But that power begins with seeing them and hearing and validating that experience for them. And so really doing that in a way that begins to give them back that power is going to be important.
Yeah, that's a good point for, I think, just in general. I have two nieces that are in their teens, and they tell me a lot of the stories that they hear from their friends, and I don't always know what to offer back. So thank you.
When teens are that's a series on its own.
Yeah, yeah, but I think about they'll be adults soon, and I don't want that cycle to continue in their own, experiences.
Other questions from the audience?
Hi. So it's been touched on a couple times that conflict or arguments are a normal part of a relationship. How do you tell when that's that normal level versus when it gets to an abusive or unhealthy level?
Any of you want to touch on that?
You can touch on it first.
Sure. So when I'm trying to explain this to other physicians, I do say it's not just about two people who fight or maybe two people who shouldn't be married. It's that power and that control, right? So it's when one person has more power in the relationship and is using that power to control the other person. And that can take many different forms. It can look like a lot of different things, but it's that power dynamic that's really key there. You might be able to expand on that a bit.
I think what I would add to that is it's also a pattern of behavior. It's also that the power is exerted every time one of the individuals in the relationship is trying to voice their concern or trying to voice a difference of opinion. And so it's that pattern of I never get to finish what I'm saying, or what I'm asking for or pointing out is always being discounted, or they get really angry and agitated when I say that. And so I think it's a combination of that pattern and then the power and control, and it's a really being mindful. And I think the other thing that's important is that these things don't happen overnight. That's not the very first time that you're talking to someone. It's clear, right? I think it happens slowly, and it's important. Many people will sometimes say, "Well, that was just an argument. It was no big deal. Why are you overreacting?" But I think for the most part, we all know when something didn't feel right, when we felt like that respect wasn't there, when we felt like we were belittled or made to feel smaller,
Or fear.
or fearful,
Right? You should not feel fearful in an argument with your partner.
Yeah, and that's I think, again, those are all things to note and to pay attention to, and it's not always necessarily oh my gosh, the first time. And I would imagine, having experienced that, it can be oh my gosh, anytime this happens. But I think again, it's just being mindful of that pattern and whether you feel you're losing yourself in that exchange. I think we have time for one more question.
So my question is going to be more on a deeper level for you as a child. I wanted to ask, when was it the moment that you realized that, your parents' behavior was affecting you in a way of confusion, sadness, anger, or anything? As I've had children, they have come with me and I've, gave them therapy with PTSD, depression as their child. I never knew a kid would, get that, because I did not experience that myself. But knowing that my kids were open enough with me to bring that and make me aware of it was definitely helpful for them at their young age. So I wanted to ask you, when was the moment you realized, this is affecting my body, my mind, or my future?
I'm going to have to go back in time a little bit here for that. Obviously, I remember the very first instance of experiencing the violence because it was just like so shocking. And so in that moment, I felt helpless. And I knew I was smart enough to know to dial 911 on the phone, but I didn't do it because it was my mom and it was my dad, and it felt like taking a side. And then I didn't know in the moment, like, what's going to happen to me, right? Like all these things firing through my head as pretty much a baby. And so I didn't make the call. I was just like frozen in that moment, crying for help because what else do you do? And, as things fast forward and progress, more violence, came up. And so there was another traumatic family event that had happened outside of all those other things. And somebody at school must have noticed that things weren't right. I mean, I was a pretty happy-go-lucky kid. I tried to, stay lighthearted and not really let anybody in on what's really going on. Like I keep things very close to the chest for most things in my life. And I just wanted to be a support for my mom. Like we always had each other. That's the one thing that we always had was I was there for her and she was there for me. And we were very open with one another. But somebody must have noticed something when I was in kindergarten because they started putting me in children's play therapy. So they would bring out like these little puppets, like I would be pulled out of class and I would sit with like a counselor and we would like, play with puppets. And I thought it was like, hey, this is pretty cool for me. I didn't know what it was at that time. But looking back, like the school took it upon themselves. They noticed a sign that I'm not sure what it was that I was doing that sparked that. But so I started therapy really young. And then as I got older, I didn't feel like talking about it anymore. I didn't want to like express those emotions. I'm like, if I don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. So I'm just going to sweep it right under the rug and move forward. And then it wasn't until I started getting like more serious into my relationships and I wanted to start working on myself more as an adult is when I really started therapy. And I started hearing about like, oh, healing your inner child. I'm like, what does that even mean? Right. And so going through that type of work as an adult is probably when the real work started. And as I had children of my own. So thank you for your question.
Thank you for the question. And thank you, Amber, for sharing. I want to kind of wrap up, and I know this is a really heavy topic, and we also know that this is something that is preventable, and it's something that we believe we can end, that intergenerational cycle. So to each of you, and maybe we'll start with you, Dr. Oates, and then go to Amber, is what's one thing that brings you hope for the future and when it comes to being able to end the intergenerational cycle?
Right. Yeah. Yes. So I would say that really taking a look at what you experienced and whether you want to learn more about what your ACEs score may be, I think is a really good place to start. But we know that there are a lot of things that can affect our life trajectory, right? And so we are much more than a number, or much more than what has happened to us. And so it gives me great hope that we have more understanding of this issue. We have opportunities like this to share this information. So I'd say if you have more questions or want to learn more about it, a great place to start is a website called numberstory.org. And they've got a lot of information and some additional resources there for anybody who wants to learn more about it.
For me personally, it's raising my kids with love and compassion and a healthy home, and hoping that their generations continue on to live free from violence and any type of relationship issues and violence free in that regard. But I think also it helps that there's a lot more resources and people are willing to have these vulnerable and difficult conversations more so than the past, because from my mom's generation and the generation before, it was something you really didn't speak about. You didn't let anybody know your business. You would just go into hiding and, reemerge and, everything is fine and dandy. But I think that we're feeling more confident in who we are as people and as women especially, and to be able to stand up for ourselves. And as much as I would love for it to be eradicated across the board, I think that we are making strides in the right direction.
Thank you both again for joining us and for sharing your stories and your experiences. And thank you to the audience for being here. At Human Options, one of the things that's incredibly important for us is to continue the dialogue and continue to talk about this. As you can see, I could actually probably spend all day talking in conversation with both these women and many others who have experienced relationship violence. It's so critical to include these conversations and to continue to go deeper and educate ourselves. Prevention isn't just about teens. It's about making sure that somebody who is experiencing relationship violence or has one first instance of relationship violence gets to get that help before it continues. And so that's our mission as an organization, is to continue to make sure that we're having these conversations, making it possible for survivors to come forward and share their experiences and get the help that they need. I appreciate you being here. We will have another episode that we hope you will join us for in September. Again, thank you for being here.